Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
And thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss everything there is to know about fantasy football. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And we are back with another show for you guys today. And this is a big show, and I know the NFL regular season ended, but this is a big show because we will be discussing some wild card matchups, some individual matchups and players to watch specifically in these games. So we're going to discuss the AFC matchups and the NFC matchups, and we're going to be discussing some sleepers, Anthony, later in the show. But so we're going to get started with the AFC since the AFC has their first wildcard game, right? So the first game of wildcard weekend includes the Oakland Raiders traveling to NRG Stadium to play the Houston Texans. So the Raiders, they don't have Derek Carr right now after suffering a fractured fibula in Week 16 game against the Indianapolis Colts. But they still got guys like Amari Cooper, Michael Crabtree that could help rookie quarterback Connor Cook, who is making his first NFL start. That's right, he's making his first NFL start in a playoff game. And the Texans, they do have a very aggressive defense. They still are out without. They're still without J.J. Watt. I think he was out for the whole year. Mm-hmm. But they're still really good defense.
Yeah, no, they're still a fantastic defense.
They're still real good defense. It's just that J.J. Watt elevates them that much. But this is a very tough defense for a rookie quarterback to face for his first ever start. It's on the road. It's a playoff, so the atmosphere is going to be just as different than it would be for a regular season game. And I know the Raiders did defeat the Houston Texans in Mexico City on Monday Night Football. But, the Raiders were a different team. The Texans were a different team. Actually, no, the Texans are technically still the same team. And this was a neutral field. But the Texans are getting the Oakland Raiders at the perfect time. If they're getting them at the right time for some reason, so to speak, they're getting the Raiders when they're down. And when Derek Carr went down, this team looked down at themselves, and they just weren't the same team for practically for 5 quarters. But there are some players to watch in this game, Anthony. And I know there's a specific player in this game that was on your fantasy team, but he wasn't thrown to a lot.
He got thrown to at the end of the year. He actually got me some points for the last few weeks of the season. We're talking about DeAndre Hopkins because they started door for Dorowitz and they started to do little passes like that. It's fine. But, the thing with Osweiler now, because he's basically getting his second chance, right? So, he's starting, and after he's getting benched for the last 2 weeks. Right. So, because you look at how this is playing out right now, right? So, the people that aren't playing, the quarterbacks that aren't playing, right? Brady's not playing. Alex Smith isn't playing. Dak Prescott isn't playing. And Matt Ryan's not playing, right? So basically 2 out of those 4 are like the elite kind of passing quarterbacks. And then you also got Alex Smith, who has had decent games, and Dak Prescott, who's had good and bad games. He's a rookie. What do you want from him, really? But with the ones that you have starting right now, because if you're going to look at the thing, like let's say you're doing one of those like daily fantasy things, right? Let's say you're doing a daily fantasy thing for this weekend. So you look at the quarterbacks that you have to go against, right? Because you got Connor Cook, you got Osweiler in this game. I would honestly look at Osweiler a little bit more because I trust him more. Because Connor Cook, I mean, the last time when he was in college in 2015, he had some good games, right? He had 300 yards passing games, 4 touchdown games when he was in college. But to be fair, we've seen quarterbacks before play well in college and then get to the pros and not be good. And you're literally throwing Connor Cook to the Wolves in the Houston Texans defense, right? Because they have been really good all year. It's just the offense hasn't been able to stay with them. So I wouldn't start Connor Cook in any way, stretch or form. No. Just put him down. And that also, kind of extends to people like Amari Cooper, right? Like, he kind of scares me a little bit too. Now, Crabtree, I would, if you can get him, because he's going to be a little bit cheaper, I would grab him. And the reason I would grab him is because Connor Cook is going to be so afraid he's going to do those checkdowns, and those checkdowns are going to go to Michael Crabtree, right? He's going to be the person who's like, oh, God, here comes Clowney. Oh, good, Jesus. And then tries to throw it out and gets to Crabtree.
Jesus.
Right. Just one of those things like, oh, gee, this is fast. This is faster than the college game. So I would look at Crabtree in that aspect. And as far as Osweiler goes, Oakland's defense hasn't been one of those things that's been kind of at that upper level, right? Like, they've been okay, but the Raiders haven't basically, how we said that the Texans have been good, but the offense hasn't stayed with them. It's kind of the reverse thing with the Raiders. The offense has been really good, but the defense hasn't stayed with them. So with something like this, I would look more, if I'm going to go play him, I would look more to Crabtree as a wide receiver because you can get him for cheaper. And for Osweiler, I wouldn't really start him. I'd trust him more than I do Connor Cook, but I would say if I'm going to do one of the players in this game, as far as matchup goes, I would go with Crabtree, and then I would also go, as far as Houston goes, I would go with somebody, as much as it pains me to say, Fedorowicz, because he loves him, and he's going to keep throwing to him. I don't love him. No. I don't love him. I do not love him. I understand that he's good, and the reason I understand he's good is because Osweiler keeps throwing to him, and he doesn't stop throwing to him, and no matter what happens, every time Fedorowicz gets the ball, and it makes me insane with rage and anger, but at this time, what am I going to do about it? Because, well, he's going to keep getting the ball, and since he's been getting the ball all year, and it's been going to him instead of DeAndre Hopkins, I would go to Fedorowicz and all the catches he's going to get, because, hell, you look at it throughout the whole year, right? He's been getting things where he's been like 6 catches, 5 catches, 4 catches, stuff like that. The man's had 80 yards receiving twice and stuff like that. He's had 4 touchdowns throughout the year. He's been okay. And now you're going to throw him in a playoff game, and I would, have a little bit of confidence in playing him. So I would look at Fedorowicz because you can get him for cheap, and I would look at Crabtree for the same reason, if you're going to do the daily fantasy thing.
Okay, I can understand your reasoning for Crabtree there because, Connor Cook is probably going to do a lot of checkdown passes.
Right.
And for that reason, I do think probably Latavius Murray is someone that you can get for cheap, but I wouldn't start him, so to speak. But he's someone, when you're talking about checkdowns, I would have to go with Lamar Miller in this game.
Okay.
I think he's someone that you can actually start. I think he's going to be relied heavily on. And, Brock Osweiler, for some reason, with a big arm, he likes to do a lot of checkdowns, and I think he's perfect for that. Moving on to the other AFC matchup here is the Miami Dolphins and the Pittsburgh Steelers at Heinz Field. The Dolphins are the 6th seed, and the Steelers are the 3rd seed. So this game involves players such as Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Jay Ajayi, Jarvis Landry. So there's a lot of star power in this game for both teams. The only thing is Matt Moore will start at quarterback for the Dolphins. He's been really efficient, to be honest with you.
He's been fine. He's been good enough as a backup. Yeah, he's been someone that you can kind of throw him in for a couple of games, and he's not going to kill it for you. Yeah. But you look at this game, and you look at, excuse me, you look at, we talked about kind of value with Crabtree and stuff like that. Okay, with this game, just Le'Veon Bell. Just play Le'Veon Bell. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it because Miami's defense, as far as rushing defense, is 30th in the NFL. The only people that are worse, Cleveland and San Francisco. They're very bad. Remember the whole year we were talking about fantasy football, and if you were a running back going against the Niners, you play that person? They're the only two that's worse than them. And the Browns aren't that far off for what Miami was. So their rush defense has been bad all year, and you get Le'Veon Bell, who, him, David Johnson, Ezekiel Elliott, 3 of the best running backs in the game. He's, top 2 or 3, number 1, depending on where you want to rank him. And against this bad defense in the cold, just Le'Veon Bell, whatever you pay for him. Because usually when you do these daily fantasy things, one of the players is going to be, you're basically like, I'm going to spend a bunch of money on him. Have that be Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. Le'Veon Bell is a must-start in this game. I do not trust Jay Ajayi in this game. I talked about on the football show that I do think the Steelers will win this in the landslide. Antonio Brown, he's someone that you're always going to start. Big Ben, always going to start. So I think a lot of the players on Miami, I think I would stay away from them. I think the one I would not stay away from would probably Jarvis Landry. He's always a top target. He played really well with Matt Moore. But if I had to choose my pick of players in this game, it would probably go Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Big Ben in that order.
See, the thing, it was J.A.J. I'd be afraid with J.A.J. to play him, and I understand if you look back, he had the 200-yard game against the Steelers.
Yeah,
and that's
what I'm saying. I don't want to play him at all.
Right, and while that looks great and that looks fantastic, the one caveat I would put to that is they did that in Miami, where it's warm. You're going to be in Pittsburgh, super cold, which I get lends to like a running style. But if you look at the Steelers' defense over the last, 6-7 weeks of the season, their rushing defense has been phenomenal. Like, I understand if you look just as a whole for Pittsburgh, they kind of don't rank that well. They rank, in the middle of the pack, 13th right now as far as rush defense goes. But outside of last week where they gave 150 yards to Isaiah Crowell in a game that basically didn't matter, they played all their backups, they haven't allowed 70 yards. Forget about 100 yards. They haven't allowed a 70-yard rusher over the last 6 weeks before that. So you're going to take a guy who's going to be basically him and Landry are the only two guys that Miami's going to rely on now that your quarterback's hurt. And you're going to be basically in the position where you have to rely on Ajayi. And if you're relying on him that much against a defense that has shown you over the last 6-7 weeks, as they've been getting healthier, that they could absolutely go against that, I would be afraid to go with Jay Ajayi, even though he's a guy that had 1,200 yards this season and 3 games with 200 yards rushing.
Yeah, and as far as this game goes, I don't trust Matt Moore. He is,
right.
Going to a hostile environment. But, we're going to take our first break here. And when we get back, we are going to discuss some matchups. We're actually going to discuss the matchups in the NFC and players in those games. So we will discuss all that when we come back to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Okay, so on the last segment here in the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, we talk about the AFC playoff matchups this weekend and wildcard weekend, but we are now going to discuss the NFC matchups. And the first NFC matchup in wildcard weekend is the Detroit Lions at the Seattle Seahawks. This game will be at CenturyLink Field. This is the primetime Saturday game. It is on NBC. This has a lot of players to watch, but just something I want to point out. I'm on ESPN. They have a little tab that says players to watch, and one of them says Christine Michael for Seattle. You want to know what the funny thing about that is?
He's not on Seattle.
He's not on Seattle. He will be playing this weekend, but he won't be playing for Seattle. He will be playing for Green Bay,
right?
Which I think is hilarious that he was their leading rusher this year. Players to watch: Christine Michael. He's not even on the team. I just think that was funny.
I mean, you can watch him. You just don't watch him there.
Technically, you can watch him.
Right.
You just gotta have to be a little more creepy about it.
Yeah. You just watch him, like, oh, he's on a different team. Why is that? Oh, he got cut from the team. But he's a leading rusher for the Seahawks. Yeah, they've kind of been a lot worse without Marshawn. They noticed Marshawn a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. But not to get off track and off topic here, there's a couple players here that are intriguing to watch.
Definitely.
Matthew Stafford, of course.
Sure.
Russell Wilson. I think Zach Zenner has kind of emerged himself as the, leading running back there in Detroit. He's actually really solid. Doug Baldwin. You got Marvin Jones. You got Golden Tate, who really finished the season strong. Marvin Jones hasn't really done a whole lot since his 200-yard game in Green Bay in week 2 or 3. Early in the season. But the player I'm really looking forward to watching this game, I'm actually looking forward to Zach Zinner. And I know this is a really tough defense, but Zach Zinner has been he's really impressed me.
Yeah.
And I do think, I'm not saying that the Lions have found himself a running back, but he's been practically the best running back they've had this year. You know, they had injuries to Amir Abdullah, Theo Riddick, Dwayne Washington. All of them didn't work out because of injuries. Zach Zinner has been the only consistent running back of the year, practically. And I'm actually kind of intrigued to watch him, so to speak. And, you know, Michael Bennett actually has some words to say. He actually thinks he looks impressive on film.
No. Say what he said. Say what Michael Bennett said.
Okay,
say the words. Say the words.
Okay, this is what Michael Bennett said about Zach Zinner. He said that he is the best white running back in the NFL.
Yes.
Which technically he is kind of right.
It's one of those things that, like, you know, Marquette King is the best black punter in the league because not many of those exist. You know,
don't exist at all.
I dare you right now to name me a white cornerback. I dare you. Like,
white
cornerback.
Cornerback?
Yes, they do not exist. So it's one of those things, like with the white running back, like, you know, there's not a lot of people. Like, yeah, every now and then you throw in like a Danny Amendola and stuff like that who does like running and receiving stuff. And to be fair with Zinner, he's, you know, over the last 2 weeks, I mean, even 3 weeks of the season, he's been somebody either rushing and receiving who can get you right around 100 yards, right? So last week he had over 100 yards with 111 or 110 total yards because he had 4 catches for 41 yards. He had a touchdown. The week before that against Dallas, when Dallas was actually playing for stuff, he had 67 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns and another 25 receiving. So he's someone who could do both things. And considering that Detroit's been kind of like, you know, just shredded with, you know, with their Amir Abdullah, Theo Riddick, the running backs have been going down all year. Now you have the situation where you at least have somebody who you can rely on, right? Someone that's just like, okay, please get us some yards, and he'll absolutely do that for you, like I said, both rushing and receiving. So he's absolutely somebody, because I still don't think his value is going to be that high because it hasn't been very long. The sample size is a small sample size for Zinner. For him to, you know, like I said, because we're all doing these based on a one-day fantasy, because unless you have some strange fantasy football league where you're still going, I don't know which. I don't think they do that in Yahoo or NFL or ESPN. I don't think any of those really do that.
Or they might do that on Sandbox.
It's one of those, like, maybe, but, you know,
shout out to Sandbox.
We're basically doing something where, you know, you're doing these, like, you know, FanDuel, DraftKings kind of, you know, one weekend thing where it's basically like, okay, I'm going to take this guy and this is what we're going to do. So in that case, Zinner's absolutely somebody, because, you know, we talked about Le'Veon Bell in the last one where you're going to spend all your money for. Okay, fine, but you're going to need another running back to do it, and he's going to be a lot cheaper option than some of the other people that you're going to be looking at, right? Because if you're going to do Le'Veon Bell, you're also not going to do someone like a Jay Ajayi, because he's going to be a lot of money as well. And we talked about last segment about how bad he can be, not how bad he can be, but how good the Steelers' run defense has been over the last month and a half of the season. So with that, I would say Zinner's someone to look at. And, you know, looking at the other matchup we have the Giants and we have the Packers. I mean, okay. So, yeah, Aaron Rodgers, he's the golden child. He's someone who, you know, you assume he's going to be throwing for a bunch of yards, right? Because if you look over basically at his game logs, he's basically been a freak. I think it's like 18 touchdowns and 0 interceptions over the last 6 weeks of the season. Like, why in the world would you not start him? But the game's in Green Bay. And I know when I was little, / now, if you go to YouTube, like, just go to YouTube and click Frozen Tundra Lambeau. And you'll see these games where basically, you know, Tom Coughlin, when he was a coach of the Giants, was freezing his face off. You see old things with Brett Favre running around. You see Bart Starr running around. You see these things where it's just like the cold is coming out of their face. It's just like 5 degrees, if not minus 5 degrees out there. And that doesn't, you know, the wind swirling all over the place, that doesn't bode well for someone like an Aaron Rodgers, right? Because he's obviously one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the game. And if the winds are swirling at 10, 15, 20 miles an hour, then all of a sudden you're not exactly the same kind of a quarterback, and you're going to more rely on running the ball. The one problem is Ocho, the guy
the
guy whose
nickname we came up for
the new nickname, not Ocho Cinco, Ocho, and by that I mean Ty Montgomery, who was the de facto running back for the team. He's a wide receiver. I say Ocho because his number is 88, and he's a wide receiver.
That's a great nickname.
And they're having him play running back. He's not a running back. Even though he did well, and he had a game where he had 100-plus yards, I think 150-plus yards rushing, it's hard to basically look over in that Giants defense, which, by the way, has been playing well too, and say, like, here's the ball and go. So after all of those words that I just said, my point is, don't start Aaron Rodgers, because even though he's been fantastic and you're like, oh no, he's been great because he's been playing, against the Vikings and against the Bears and stuff like that, all that's fine. Lambeau is going to be so cold in January, and he's not going to throw for those 300 yards. Like, he may throw for a couple hundred yards, but it's not going to be what you would expect for him to be, especially if you're taking him as your main quarterback in one of these, daily fantasy things.
Yeah, a player I really like in this game is Paul Perkins, the New York Giants running back. He's kind of come on late, and later in the season. But I do think he's going to make a huge impact for the New York Giants because, like you said, this is in a very cold weather game.
Right.
Eli Manning, I think he's going to have some success this Sunday against the Packers, but they have to get the running game going. And that's something they started to do later on this season. That was one of my main concerns about the New York Giants was they can't run the football.
Yeah.
But Paul Perkins, in the year, his last game, he went 102 yards for 21 touches.
Yeah, the last month of the season, he's been fantastic.
He was really fantastic. So I really do like him better than Rashad Jennings. I actually like him a little better than Ty Montgomery, but Ty Montgomery, of course, he is a receiver. I like Paul Perkins in this game. I think he's kind of like the most underrated player in this game.
No, 100%.
And he is kind of a sleeper. I was going to say him for the sleeper segment, but...
Yeah, no, but that's the thing, because you look at him, and he had 100 yards rushing last week, and then even someone like a Rashad Jennings who had 52 yards rushing, he's somebody that you get both of those guys, and that's going to go well against the Packers defense. The Packers defense, for as good as the offense has been, the defense basically hasn't been keeping up with them. And if you can have both of those guys, maybe they kind of detract, they take away from each other. One of them doesn't get as many yards. But, I would be a little bit afraid, with the Giants, or with the Packers going against that Giants defense.
But, it's a very exciting time right now in the NFL. The regular season has ended, but it's a little bittersweet because the season will probably end. It will end in 4 weeks, but the playoffs are here, people, and so we're not done talking about the playoffs. We're going to take our last break, and we're going to discuss some sleepers in these playoff matchups, and we will talk about our sleepers when we come back at the Golden State Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back, and we're going to discuss some sleepers in this weekend's wildcard games. We discussed, the AFC playoffs. We discussed the NFC playoff matchups for this weekend, but we got a couple of sleepers. I got one. Anthony says he has one.
I have one.
He has one. Everyone gets one.
Everybody gets one.
But my sleeper of the weekend has to be Sterling Shepard, the New York Giants rookie receiver there. I really do like him in this game. He is second in the team with 8 touchdowns. Odell Beckham has 10. But I do think that this secondary is a really good matchup for Sterling Shepard, and I know it's going to be cold, and I know it's going to be a tough time throwing the football in that type of weather, but I do think that Green Bay is going to really find a way to defend against Odell Beckham. In these playoff games, you got to take the best player out. The best player for the Giants offense is Odell Beckham. So I do think with the possibility of Odell Beckham being taken away, I think that means more opportunities for Sterling Shepard. And when called upon, Sterling Shepard has been really good. There is some concern because he's only amassed over 100 yards once this season, but he's been a reliable target for Eli Manning. He does have a total of 105 targets, and when you lay out on the Giants offense, the team leader in targets is Odell Beckham with 169, which is a lot. But second on that list is Sterling Shepard, 105. So he is the second most targeted receiver on that team. And Eli Manning, he's just a different animal in the playoffs. And I like to say, you can't spell elite without Eli.
You're still going with that. You're still saying those words?
I have to.
Okay, you don't have to.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, that's not all right. So I do like Sterling Shepard, actually. That's a pretty good one as far as somebody who is, you're going to rely on Odell Beckham a lot. And so he's kind of someone else because, Victor Cruz hasn't been the guy that you'd hoped he would be, so he can kind of step in. Sterling Shepard can and be that guy. So I was looking at these things, and I wanted to go with Latavius Murray, right? Because, the dude has 12 touchdowns on the season rushing, and, the one problem with that is he hasn't had any in the last 3 weeks. And 2 of those 3 weeks, they absolutely had something to play for. Pretty much every week they've had something to play for. And he hasn't basically been able to do anything the last 2 weeks. Basically 51 yards over the last 2 weeks rushing and no touchdown. So I was going to go with him, and I was like, maybe not. The one person, honestly, who I think can actually do pretty well, and it's kind of a sleeper, it's kind of not, is Osweiler. And this isn't my lament on Fedorowicz or anything else like that. My thing actually with Osweiler is, okay, so he got benched, and now he's going to be reinserted back in the game. And the defense that he's going against, right, the pass defense and the run defense that he's going against in Oakland, the pass defense is ranked 23rd, and the rush defense is ranked 24th. So they're basically like a middle to the bad defense all the way around. They're 23rd as far as passing goes, and he does actually have people, whether it's Will Fuller the fourth, who is doing well to start the year. He has DeAndre Hopkins, who he basically refound in the last week of the season, and then Savage found him in the week before that. And he has Fedorowicz that he can throw to. So he has a lot of people that he can actually throw to, and that doesn't even include people that have come on randomly out of the blue. Someone like a Ryan Griffin, who has 50 catches for 442 yards on the season. He has a decent amount of talent that he can throw to, and you're going against a bad Oakland defense and an Oakland team that, honestly, if stuff goes bad for the first quarter and a half, that team's going to start kind of their emotions are kind of going to go down because they don't have the confidence that they usually would if they would have had Derek Carr.
Yeah, they lost their leader.
Yeah, so
yeah.
Houston, that's their dude, right? That's their dude to start the year, and then he got benched, now he came back. So at least they have a familiarity with him, right? It's not one of those things like with Connor Cook. This is his first time starting, period, in the playoffs. Have fun. Go against this pass defense with Houston that's ranked second in the league. Good luck trying to actually be a good quarterback there. So I think with actual, Osweiler, I think he can actually be really good against a bad Oakland defense and a team that, after the first quarter and a half, if something goes bad, he can exploit some of the stuff that they don't have the same confidence they would because their quarterback, their general, their leader, all those little, terms that we like to use about, he's a field general, okay, well, that dude's gone. That dude's not coming back. He broke his leg. He's out. So I can legitimately see Osweiler throwing stuff around because I was going to say, Latavius Murray, and I was going to say Washington too, but the problem with that is whether it's Richard, whether it's Washington, whether it's Murray, they're all going to share these things, right? Not one of them is going to be the guy, right? Washington was a guy 2 weeks ago, and so was Richard a little bit, and before that it was Latavius Murray. So if I were to say one, I'm guessing at this point, to be fair, we're all guessing, but at this point I'm just saying this guy's going to be the one out of the three, and it's really hard to do that. But with Osweiler, he's someone who is obviously comfortable with the offense, knows what to do, and now with a second chance with basically new life, where it's basically, it's a thing where, you were able to get your job back. I think he's going to play a lot better, especially against this bad Oakland defense.
Yeah, and I do like the Osweiler pick because, he is going against a really bad defense. They probably, I wouldn't say they have the worst defense in the league, but it's just not. They're better when their offense is playing better. That's
right.
Why that's why we never talked about their defense a whole lot,
right? Because
their offense was so good.
Sure,
but with the Raiders losing their leader in Derek Carr,
yeah,
it really does hurt this team. We just saw how this team looked like last week in Denver, and in the fourth quarter, Week 16 against the Indianapolis Colts. When Derek Carr went down, they look like a complete different team. It looks like they're really down on the dumps. That's what they really look like. They're down on the dumps. But if the Raiders realize that they're playing in the playoffs against practically one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league, then I think they will be fine. But I do think that the fact that Houston is at home, and the matchup kind of bodes well with Osweiler going against his defense, because I do think, he does have some underrated talent, and he does have I think he has a top 5 receiver in DeAndre Hopkins, even though his numbers don't speak for themselves. I think Osweiler is a really good... I think he's a very solid sleeper this week.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, well, that concludes the show, Anthony. I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast. You can catch the show on a variety of platforms: iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. And, of course, as always, on the GSMCpodcast.com website. You can follow the show on a variety of platforms on social media: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Twitter and Instagram handle is at GSMC_football, and on Facebook at the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. But as always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
I don't know why I said my name like that. I can't even say my own name. But yeah, okay, let's try it again. I'm Jeremiah.
And I am Anthony.
And enjoy the playoffs this weekend, guys. And I will be back on Tuesday to discuss to pretty much recap the playoffs. You guys have a good day and have a pleasant tomorrow.